Everybody dies, don't they? Everybody come back, don't they?
City of Dancing Horses. Written and narrated by Tony Walker. Book 3 in the Devil's Children trilogy. Chapter 1. Vienna, June 1925. The bright yellow laburnum has been and gone, but the last lilac still lingers in the shaded gardens and parks, perfuming the evenings, reminding them of what they have lost. It is unseasonably warm for June, a sign of the summer to come. On the ring, the overdone ornamented architecture frowns down on people whose coffee is chicory and whose coats are made to last. The double-headed imperial eagle is painted over on the walls, but its shadow is everywhere. The Holy and Apostolic Empire is now extinct, and so Czechs and Slovaks, Ruthenians and Magyars are free to rule their own affairs, and German Austria sits lost aside the Danube, arguing whether she exists at all. The purging of the empire to separate out the mixed seeds of different races has begun and will never be finished. Evil upon evil in the search for purity. Yet Vienna remains the furnace of modern Europe. This city, the heart of the continent, was the origin of the snake women of Klimt and the tortured questioning of Mahler. It was the place Freud first plumbed the depths of the id. It gave birth to Zionism and to Nazism. Psychoanalysts, writers and painters search through the rubbish of the soul for titanic images and pull out monsters, while the Viennese drink ersatz coffee and wish for an easier salvation. 2. Rosa Oderberg at the séance. I did not find the smell of incense unpleasant. Indeed, it reminded me of church. The room was as gloomy, lit only by the glimmer of candles and the dull sheen of gold where she'd thrown golden drapes over the furniture. Golden halos shone around the heads of painted women, their flat smiling faces staring out at the pictures that hung over large on the walls of the small room. Frau Bender sat in her armchair. It was the only armchair round the table, and was most likely designed to put us in mind of a throne. The whole experience here was iconic, and she was playing the role of the Queen of Heaven. She asked us to join hands, and her assistant moved silently and efficiently behind us, blowing out the candles. Darkness rose up. My eyes were slow to adjust, and I saw nothing. She was most likely a fraud, and I was certainly prepared to be deceived. Still, my hands were on the table, though I did not reach out to the others. Even so, on either side, their hands found mine, timid, searching and desperate that the séance should go ahead and give them what they wanted. Before the lights went out, I studied my neighbours from the corners of my eyes. A middle-aged man with sad, drooping moustache and heavy gaze. A young girl, blonde-haired, dressed for summer, but quiet and nervous-looking. Another man who looked bored. Of all of them, I thought he must be the stooge. Then an old woman with a wrinkled neck and thin grey hair, and beside me a woman of my own age. I thought I recognized her. Vienna is not a large city when one has lived there most of one's life, and I could have seen her anywhere. In a shop yesterday, at an exhibition 10 years ago. She was new. She reminded me of myself, from the days when I hoped that I was different from all the other lost souls who came to see Frau Bender and pay the 15 shillings she asked. Quiet gathered, a pause, a silence, a hesitation. Then Frau Bender spoke in a low man's voice. This man talked with a Tyrolean accent and offered messages from Maria. They weren't claimed by any of us around the table, and the voice changed to a high musical sing-song. Rose petals began to fall on our hands out of the darkness. The young girl on my right grasped and withdrew her hand, only to return it to its place against mine, tentatively finding my fingers again. I could see nothing, and began to get a little frightened. The singing of a bird whirled round the table above our heads. The smell of incense grew, and I made out the glow of the burning cones in the small brazier on the circular table. More messages came. This time my neighbours answered and were glad to receive them. A sailor, then a man with a limp, a soldier, of course a soldier. There should be so many dead soldiers crowding around us that there would be no room for any other kind of spirit. The girl, the sad mustachioed man, the old woman, they all received the messages hungrily and sat quietened afterwards, as if a struggling bird inside them had been stilled. Frau Bender spoke again. This time she used her own voice and leaned in my direction. It was for me. There was no question about that, even in the dark. She said she brought a message from a young girl, a lovely dark-haired girl in her early 20s. The girl wanted to speak to her mother. I remained silent. All around me I sensed the others listening. They knew it was for me too. The message was repeated. "The girl wants her mother," said Frau Bender. "Is her mother with us?" I started to speak, but my throat was dry. I hadn't said a word for around an hour. I cleared my throat. "What's the girl's name?" Frau Bender grinned. She said, "Mummy, why did you put me in that place?" Some joke, perhaps. Some cruelty at my expense. Who would hate me so much to do this? I felt unwell. Frau Bender spoke again in the girl's voice. "Mummy, I'm coming back." My head spun. The darkness and incense disorientated me. From the walls, the golden pictures of young women I could no longer see flowed into my eyes and out of my mouth. I had not been well for a little while. Suddenly the strong animal smell of a horse came, and I heard it nearby neighing softly as if it were hungry. The kind face and eyes of the black horse, not a white Lipizzaner as it should have been in Vienna, appeared from the dark. It was just an hallucination. I knew that, but I stood and knocked over my chair. The young man helped me out. He knew his way in the dark, the scoundrel. At the door he asked me how I felt, as if he could do anything. I know the dead cannot live again. But to hear her voice after all this time must only be a warning. 3. From the papers of Dr. Emanuel Holtz. The patient answered at once. "I have terrible dreams. Only recently I dreamt I was coming home at night. Everything was quiet as death. The door into the living room was half open, and I saw my mother hanging from a chandelier and swinging in the cold wind that blew in through the open windows. Another time I dreamt that a terrible noise had broken out in the house at night. I got up and discovered that a frightened horse was tearing through the rooms. At last it found the door into the hall and jumped through the hall window from the 4th floor into the street below. I was terrified when I saw it lying there, all mangled." Horse is an archetype that is widely current in mythology and folklore. As an animal, it represents the non-human psyche, the subhuman animal side, the unconscious. That is why horses in folklore sometimes see visions, hear voices, and speak. The horse is a dynamic and vehicular power. It carries one away like a surge of instinct. It is subject to panics like instinctive creatures who lack higher consciousness. It also has to do with sorcery and magical spells, especially the black night horses which herald death. It is evident then that horse is an equivalent of mother, with a slight shift of meaning. The mother stands for life at its origin, the horse for merely the animal life of the body. If we apply this meaning to the text of the dream, its interpretation will be, the animal life is destroying itself. It is notorious that one often dreams of one's own death, but that is no serious matter. When it is really a question of death, the dream speaks another language. 4. Wilhelm Oderberg in the Café Herrenhof. The first baker's lads were arriving. aprons white as snow and smelling of crisp Kaiser rolls, poppy seed loaves and salty breadsticks. The smell of freshly roasted coffee filled the room. I sat with a Neue Freie Presse. I was the first to read it that morning, as I usually was. I suppose I am a creature of habit. Same table in the same alcove by the front, same time, same type of coffee. There was no reason to change what had always suited me. Outside in the Herrengasse, I watched the people going about their business, hurrying by on their way to work. Some beggars loitered even here, a street famous for its well-heeled residents. The Herrenhof stood at number 10, where the Café Greensteitel had stood. Though only opened at the end of the war, I migrated there, partly because I had frequented the Greensteitel in my youth, and partly because I enjoyed the clientele. The regulars could be divided into three camps, the writers, the psychoanalysts, and the nobodies. Not that I was exactly a nobody. I knew Alfred Adler and Sigmund Freud well enough to nod to, and I had once played chess with Robert Musil, and won, but I did not cast enough light for them to invite me over to their table. That was not surprising. It suited me. I had for a long time been submerged in darkness, and there were places in me that no longer welcomed too much light. I lifted the newspaper and heard the soft sound of an envelope falling from it onto the table. It was an ordinary brown envelope, and it was addressed to me, Herr Professor G.W. Oderberg. The handwriting was neat, but unfamiliar. I opened it and found inside it a newspaper cutting and a card. The cutting, from the Neues Wiener Tageblatt, a paper I did not usually read, was dated a week earlier and described mysterious lights in the central cemetery, attributed by some to grave robbers. I turned the card. It was not an ordinary playing card, but from a tarot pack. My stomach tightened and the room shifted. The table pressed against my hands, no longer steady but anxious, as if it too were aware of what shadow had fallen upon it. They always dealt me cards, as if our lives were a game to them. The King of Spades in Paris, and now in Vienna, the Hanged Man. Meaning pressed close, but it would not reveal itself, not yet. My thoughts broke, shattering, at first impossible to put in order, and then, when I could not escape the knowledge that this was their work, the foreboding closed round me like a chain, tightening link by link. Of course, I had always known they would not leave us alone for long. My duty to Liesel would not release me, even if it carried me to death's shore, even there. And they knew that. They had played the first card once again, orchestrating everything like puppet masters. Fear rushed at me. The Herrenhof grew unfamiliar. In every alcove and every shadow their presence seemed to lurk. De masticiatone mortuorum in tumulis. Behind every waiter's familiar face was concealed possible deceit and malice. I looked around me as if he were watching me from somewhere, taking pleasure in my confusion. This was his sign. The dark man whom we had seen in Paris was now in Vienna. I heard someone laugh behind me. I turned, startled by the slightest thing. It was a man joking with Franz, the waiter. He saw me looking and raised his eyebrow. Did I want another coffee? My mind settled back on the card. Then my table, my half-drunk coffee. I breathed again. The man spoke before I realized he was there. I did not know him. He was short, with jet-black hair and heavy dark eyes, wearing a heavy winter suit, though it was now summer. The suit had indeterminate stains on it. He stared at me quietly, as if waiting for permission to speak. He took my startled glance as his cue. "Excuse me," he said, speaking German with a Slavonic accent. I was too taken aback to reply, so he continued, "Has that corpse you planted in your garden started to sprout yet?" "What?" With a crooked smile he said, "The corpse, of course, is symbolic of the dying god. He must die so that we might live. In ancient Egypt, the dismembered body of Osiris was scattered, and in each place the grain grew up again. And then they knew that Osiris had not really died. The myth of the dying god is in all cultures. How about yours? I started to rise, clutching the tarot card and newspaper cutting. I gazed at him. My eyes wouldn't focus. His had the brightness of a bird's eyes, full of an intense alien intelligence. He had the unblinking gaze of a lunatic. He unnerved me. Too strange after the newspaper cutting. I began to think that he had been sent, but of course he was only a poor man whose mind had broken. There were so many of them still, even 7 years after the end of the war. I'm sorry, I said. I must be going. I have to get to work. He stepped back to let me pass. Just as I was leaving, he said, "Goodbye, Professor." I stopped, paranoia flooding back. You know me. I know your work. You wrote the seminal treatise on the European vampire hysteria. He unbalanced me. I couldn't stay. I couldn't even nod. I turned and walked away. At the door of the cafe, I spun round. He had taken my seat, opened the paper, and was contentedly finishing my coffee. I walked back to the university by the way of the Schreivogelgasse. A narrow bookshop there might have something on tarot symbolism. Its frontage was plain, the sign above the door reading Hans Schmidt, Buchhändler, in fading white letters on a peeling black board. The bell rang as I entered. Shelves lined the walls, with a long bookcase down the centre. Students browsed, blocking the way until one recognized me, bowed, and stepped aside. Behind the counter stood Schmidt, smiling. He was about my age, bald, a little overweight, forever nudging his gold-rimmed spectacles into place. In his black suit and pearl waistcoat, with a green tie tucked neatly beneath, he looked much as he always had. "Professor Oderberg, one of my best customers. How good to see you." I had known Schmidt for years. In truth, I could not remember a time when I had not known him or his shop. "Good day, Schmidt. I'm actually looking for something on the tarot." He nodded rapidly. Yes, of course." He bustled out from behind his desk, elbowing his way past the students without ceremony, and reached for a thin book from the middle case, just above his head. "It is in English," he smiled, "but that will be no difficulty for the Herr Professor." I nodded and purchased the book. Then he lowered his voice slightly. "By the way, I have acquired a very rare volume, a 15th century occult manuscript entitled Liber Surrexit de Sepulchro, the Book of Rising from Tombs." He tapped the side of his nose. "Very rare. Would you care to see it?" I smiled. "You know me and books. I've never heard of it. What can you tell me of its provenance?" Over the years I had spent a great deal of money with him. "Come through to the back." His office lay behind, a cramped and airless chamber, dark and overflowing with papers, invoices, ink pots, and books, piles upon piles of books. He guided me to a chair by the desk. "Wait here," he said. He disappeared for a few minutes and returned with the book cradled in his arms. "This manuscript dates from 1590, published in Amsterdam. I bought it from a man in Krakow, a trickster," he said with a wince. "So I must recover my money, you understand. I'm not looking to make an enormous profit. The only other copy was lost when the French burned the alchemical library in Heidelberg in 1693. I asked, "Who's the author?" He shrugged. "No one knows. Some say Michael Meyer, others Hermes Trismegistus himself." I laughed. "They all make that claim. Let me read." He said, "Of course. I must just go and make sure the students aren't stealing all of my books." He winked. "I know I can trust you." I translated the Latin aloud. The dead returned from Jerusalem, where they found not what they sought. Nor had I found what I sought in the teachings of the Church. It asked for faith without knowledge, and guarded its secrets jealously. I wanted to know for myself. That hunger had already cost me dear in books, volumes that promised truth, but never delivered. Still, I went on searching. I leafed through the manuscript, each page releasing a faint breath of age as I turned it. The woodcuts showed strange alchemical scenes. At first it read like an allegory, some nameless wanderer moving through medieval Europe in pursuit of hidden wisdom. Yet, as I followed the imagery, I felt a disquieting clarity. This was no simple parable, but a guide, its fables concealing instructions for the raising of the dead. I didn't hear Schmidt return until his voice was at my shoulder. "Ah, Professor, I can't let you read the whole book. You wouldn't then need to buy it." I laughed, leaned back, and tried to sound brisk. "So, how much then?" He named a sum, the price of a house. I gasped. "You're joking." No, I told you, it's a very special book." "It's far beyond my means, I'm afraid." I rose from the chair. He sucked at his bottom lip, studying me. "Well, I have another customer lined up, but since you and I have known each other so long, I'll keep it aside a little longer." I shook my head. "I cannot begin to afford such a price, not on my salary. My wife would never forgive me if I spent so much." He bowed me out into the shop. "You pretend you're not interested," he chuckled, wagging a finger, "but you'll be back for it." Out on the street, I told myself I had been right to leave it, yet something about the book kept my attention. I had the odd feeling I had left something unfinished behind. Then again, that was how I had acquired so many volumes already gathering dust on my shelves. I would save my money and save a scolding from Rosa. From Secrets of the Tarot by Judith Leslie, published New York, 1920. The Hanged Man is the 12th card of the major arcana of the tarot deck. It marks a perilous turning in the seeker's journey, when forward progress is denied and the path is held in suspension. The figure shown is a man hanging inverted by one foot, his face calm yet strangely illuminated, as if seeing the world with unnatural clarity. This card signifies a time when old convictions must be abandoned, when what once seemed certain is overturned. The seeker must submit to trial, to waiting, to the unsettling reversal of all ordinary perspectives. Illumination will come, but it will not be of the kind first sought. It will demand sacrifice, and the truth revealed may prove more costly than anticipated. 6. Rosa Oderberg sees a young woman in the rain. The iceman had just called, humping huge lumps of ice upstairs for our icebox. I spent the morning following the maid, Clara, about the flat. I couldn't settle. Every time I closed my eyes, I feared I would see the horse again. Clara had only been with us a matter of weeks, and though she never said anything, I could tell from the way she looked at me and from something in the tone of her voice that she carried the working-class Viennese dislike of Jews. Not that I was officially a Jew. My parents had converted to Catholicism, like many others of their faith who were trying to avoid trouble and get ahead in the Holy and Apostolic Empire. It had worked to an extent. Father had indeed prospered, but despite the number of masses he attended, he never escaped his origins. In Vienna, religion was only the surface of Jewishness. I had been Catholic since the day I was born, but I was still a Jewess to Clara. It gave her a way to look down on me, in return for the way she supposed I looked down on her for her lack of education and culture, though I didn't. Our little dog Wotan jumped up onto my lap. Glancing out of the window, I saw it had begun to rain again. June, and the parks and cemeteries were full of flowers, their heads drooping in the rain. The weather hung in a mist over streets and houses, a premonition of eternal grey winter to come. I went up to the window and watched the people scurry by. There were few cars about, more beggars than cars in fact. I watched customers go into coal the shoemaker's opposite, bringing boots to be mended for the 10th time because they couldn't afford a new pair. We all knew that even new things made in Vienna would fall apart. How Wilhelm crowed when he came back from London with his new English brogues, walking nearly the full way round the ring just to show off his shiny brown shoes. The rain streamed down the windows of the flat. Umbrellas were up, hats pulled low. A car went past. And then I saw her. Dark hair, no hat, a black fur coat. Something in the way she moved caught my eye, the familiar tilt of her shoulders, the rhythm of her arms. My breath caught, but it could not be Liesel. She had been dead these 7 years. The grave had claimed her. Yet my heart, obstinate and desperate, wanted it to be her all the same. I rose so quickly I sent the dog scampering from my lap. I hurried from the room, past Clara, who looked startled and faintly triumphant in her belief that I was not right in the head. On the communal stairwell, the stone steps rang beneath my shoes. For years, I had kept a sliver of hope. In the first and second years, I told myself she might only have run away, that a letter would come. By the 7th year, I had learned to say dead aloud, but in my heart I had never accepted it. Now, seeing that figure through the rain, the wound opened fresh and bled. I wanted to see her again. I ran and dragged open the door to the street. The dog Wotan nosed behind my ankles to see who it was. I pushed him back into the house. A woman stood in front of me. Not my beautiful dark-haired girl, but a blousy, grey-faced woman in middle age, with dyed blonde hair and brown roots. Frau Bender, the medium, stood there, looking wet and sheepish. I was taken aback. A dull drumbeat began in my cranium, crashing like muffled timpani. "Grüß Gott, Frau Oderberg," said Frau Bender. "I've been waiting here, trying to find courage to speak to you." "Grüß Gott, Frau Bender. Excuse me, please." I pushed past her and started down the street, but there was nothing. Just people and rain on wet cobblestones. No Liesel. The pain in my head flashed across my right eye, blinding me for a second. I slumped back against the door. "Are you all right, Frau Oderberg?" I put my hand to my eye. "Just a headache. I get them increasingly these days. Let me help you upstairs." She took my arm, and I didn't resist. We mounted the stairs and into the flat, past Carla, who looked bemused, contemptuous, and alarmed all at once. Frau Bender sat me down in one of our old leather armchairs and barked at Carla to get me some brandy. The girl scurried off. Clearly, she finally recognized someone worthy of her respect. Carla brought me back some brandy. I drank it, though I knew it wouldn't clear the headache. These pains went on their own eventually. I could still talk, so I asked Frau Bender to sit. She stood there in subordinate tentativeness in front of me, and then sat, it seemed, because she wanted to please rather than because she wanted to sit. I began to give an apology for my behaviour. "I thought I saw someone on the street." "Oh," said Frau Bender vaguely. There was something on her mind, and I wondered if she were going to ask me for money. She looked at the carpet in front of my feet and then said hesitantly, "Perhaps you think I'm a fraud." I did think that, of course, but fighting the throbbing in my forehead, I said, "No, of course not." There she shook her head. "It's true that sometimes I use theatrical props to achieve a dramatic effect. The message is important, but the presentation is more crucial still. I must get people into the right frame of mind, you see. You should see the many broken people who come to me for a message from their loved ones and who go away faces beaming because they now have some reassurance." She started to justify herself and her profession. I laughed, despite myself. "Ha! So you see yourself as some kind of psychoanalyst, like Dr. Freud." She nodded, then realized I was mocking her. I felt guilty. Quietly now, she said, "Frau Oderberg, I have a message for you. This time there was no mistake. It came from somewhere outside me, into my mind." The same mix of skepticism and cloying hope filled me, just as it had the night of the séance. I waited, not breathing, waiting for her to tell me that Liesel had contacted her, but I also waited for the bubble of hope to burst because I knew such things do not happen. I saw she was frightened, and it made me frightened. She said, "It was a warning. Please take it seriously. Please do not think I am making this up. I would not upset anyone unless it was necessary to break the news." I felt my heart racing. I became impatient with her. "What was this warning, Frau Bender?" I used the calm but displeased tone I'd employed as a schoolteacher. She paused for a long time. I could have shaken her. Then she said, "It was from your son, Otto." I flooded with sudden guilt. I was overwhelmed. I had waited so eagerly for Liesel and forgotten about my son, killed fighting for his emperor and his fatherland. It was an echo of my guilt at always secretly preferring sweet Liesel to the silent little boy who couldn't say what he wanted unless his younger sister said it for him. "Otto," I said. "Yes, Otto was your son." She questioned me, and I realized that she looked hesitantly relieved, as if for a moment she had thought she had made a mistake and the message might be for someone else. "Yes, Otto was my son, killed at Lemberg." She took my hand. "Frau Oderberg, Otto says that you must be careful. That someone is coming, someone who prowls around like a roaring lion waiting to devour us. I recognized the quotation, 1 Peter, chapter 5, verse 8. In case I hadn't understood, she said slowly with shaking voice, "You know who that is?" "Yes," I said, "the devil." She was laughable. And I was relieved. My fear left me. This was the babble of a circus fortune-teller. I heard the door handle turning. The door clicked open. It was Wilhelm. He stood there, not knowing what to make of the scene. Me, slumped on the sofa drinking brandy, Frau Bender on her knees before me, crying. "Hello, Rosa. I'm sorry I didn't know you had a guest," he mumbled. He even seemed embarrassed. Him. Frau Bender glanced at him. "But Otto said that the archangel himself would come to your husband." She hadn't taken her coat off. She got up from the chair in a fluster and went over to the door, almost pushing past Wilhelm. She nodded at him, then half went out and turned and said, "If there's anything I can do, please just tell me." It struck me. Those were words usually heard at funerals.
Everybody dies, don't they? Everybody come back, don't they? Isn't that so?
You tried to get into the locked drawer today, didn't you?
How do the dead come back, Mother? What's the secret?